I guess, academic stuff, I reckon you'd say, or information stuff, and it's not necessarily, we're going to only have one application tonight on something, but other than that, it'll just be information stuff. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn with me to Daniel chapter 1. I promise you that for the most part, we won't be as slow as we are in these first couple of weeks, but there's just some things that we need to get straight first, okay? Daniel chapter 1. I'm going to read the first two verses again. We were there last time, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things in these verses. It says, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and Jerusalem to besiege it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So let's talk about that little bit just a minute. Today, as we were walking, Rankin brought up something that he had seen somewhere, the internet somewhere, and it's people talking about mistakes in the Bible. If you can find a mistake in the Bible, will you believe? Yeah, well, can you still trust the Bible if you find mistakes, that kind of stuff? And that's a liberal mind, by the way. There's these liberals out there, they'll find their so-called mistakes, and once you sit down and you look at what they call a mistake, you can reason through it, and it's not a mistake, okay? And so that's what we was talking about. But one of the books I told you last week that is attacked the most is Daniel, okay? Daniel verse 1, Daniel says, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. There's a lot of evidence that Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, when he come and besieged Jerusalem, it was before the battle of Carchemish. I think is the way you say that. Okay? And if it was, then he was like a co-regent. He was not the king yet. He was the king's son at that point. And so they make a big deal about that. So let me just say, it may, and it probably did, take place before he was actually king, crowned king. But what do you think about somebody like David when he is out in the sheepfold, 14 years old maybe, 13 years old? Rudy, pretty little boy. And Samuel, the last of the judges, anoints him king of Israel. Okay? And the Bible refers to him as king before he's ever king. All right? So it happens. It's a protraction. It's something that's looking to the future, and it's there. So I don't want to make a big deal about that, but I just want to tell you that that's one of the places that the liberal mind attacks this. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a perfect explanation of it as well. And but they don't see it that way. They see it as when he's writing it here, this is when he carried the stuff away, and he's calling him king. But you're right. Just like David was king later on. And it's, like I say, they make a big deal out of it. But they attack the book pretty well anyway. So anyway, that's one of the things. Now I want to look at verse 1 and 2 again and talk about Jehoiakim. The Bible says he was subdued. It says the third year of the king reign, the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and Jerusalem and besieged it, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. So he subdued him. He was able to capture the Jerusalem. And look at what it says here. It says, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar. So he only carried some of the gold. Now y'all have read the Old Testament. I know y'all have, all of you. Y'all probably really study over in the book of Leviticus. Y'all know about all them gold snuffers and all that kind of stuff, right? And so he took part of the vessels back initially. Brother, can you pull up 2 Chronicles 36:18? All right, there you go. And all of the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king, and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. This is later on. Okay. So he eventually brings all of the gold and all of the silver out of Jerusalem, and he carries it back to Babylon, and he puts it into the place of his God, into where the temple of his God. Okay, treasure house of his God. So why did he do that? Let's talk about that to start with. What does that show? Yes. Into their pantheon, where they were at, our God defeated your God. It's kind of like my dog's bigger than your dog, and so they carried it back. Okay. Okay. All right. So they did that. They carried the vessels away. So there was at least 2 deportations. That's what I want you to see. Another thing that we're going to see in just a second, but another thing that people talk about, discuss, is whether Daniel and his friends was taken away when Nebuchadnezzar left, or did they send people back and get them? Okay, we'll talk about that in just a minute. So I want you to look at one other thing in verses 1 and 2. It says, and the Lord, this verse 2, gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, and part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought these vessels in the treasure of his God, the house of his God. Shinar. Somebody tell me about Shinar. Can anybody tell me about Shinar? Okay. Anybody tell me about Shinar? Okay. Shinar is used for Babylon with a nuance. It's a hostile faith. Okay? We're going to see that when we look at these names of these Hebrew men in just a minute. But it's a hostile faith. And so when you see Shinar, that's what you're seeing. It associates itself with Nimrod. Anybody know Nimrod? Yeah, okay. Genesis 10:10. There we go. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Achaia and in the land of what? Okay, so Shinar is connected to Babel, all right? Yeah. Now, yes. Give me, if you can, give me Genesis 11:2. It's associated with the Tower of Babel. And it came to pass that they journeyed from the east. This is when God told them to go. And they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. This is where they built the Tower of Babel. If we read that whole thing, this is where they built it. So Babel, the Tower of Babel, all of that is found in Shinar. Now, if you listen to Rob Decker, the only person in here who's ever heard Rob Decker is my wife. Dr. Rod Decker he's a pastor somewhere else, but was a teacher at Piedmont, and he taught the Pentateuch. And in the Pentateuch, his idea was there's two lines. There's a wicked line and a saved line. And he sees those two seeds throughout Bible. And there's a lot of people that see that, by the way. And so if he's right, this is the wicked line that actually disobeys God. He tells them to scatter. They go into one place. They create a city to build a name for themselves. If we was to go over there and look at it, all of it is to build a name for themselves. So this is against God. That's what I want you to keep seeing. Brother, can you pull up Zechariah 5:11 pretty quick? So all of this stuff is attached to this place that Daniel and his friends are being carried to. And he said to me, to build a house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established, and there upon her own base. Give me verse 12. That ain't what I want. Okay. Give me verse 10 then. He said, the angel talked with me, whither of these bear the ephod. What it is right here, if you read this whole passage, and I thought I was going to get it out of one verse, but I'm not. If you read this whole passage, the wicked eventually are banished to Shinar, basically. That's where they're going to be banished to. That's what that passage is talking about. All right. Let's see what else we got. You got it. Then he said to me, this is the curse that go forth from the face of the whole earth. For everyone that stealeth shall be cut off of this side according to it, and everyone that swears shall be cut off this side according to it. And as you go down, they're going to build it in Shinar. That's where all the cursed are going to be in Shinar, the banished. Okay? Thank you, brother. Let's go back to the book of Daniel, and let's pick up in verse 3 now. And the king, now this is going to be Nebuchadnezzar, spake unto Ashpenazar, or something like that, the master of the eunuchs, and that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, of the king's seed, and of the princes. Now I want you to look at verse 4. Children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, skillful in wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding in science, and such had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the language or the tongue of the Chaldeans. Okay, so let's stop right there and let's talk about this. The king spake to Ashpenaz. The name is probably in Aramaic. We don't know what it means. There's people that say they know what it means, but we don't. His name appears in ancient texts from that time, and it's in text that's called Nippur. Okay? But his name, so we know that he was a real person. Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right, so what does it say he is? He's the master of what? Eunuchs. Okay, so there's this argument that he's just the master of the king's nobles. Okay. Yes. We're not talking about Potiphar, though. But yes, exactly. I got Potiphar wrote down right here. So the argument goes something like this, that the word is saurus. That is actually the word that is referred to as eunuchs. is saros. It can be used for a court officer, and it also can be used for castration. Okay. There's people that are divided in this court. Montgomery Boyce does not believe they were eunuchs. Another theologian by the last name of Charles points out that they couldn't have any blemish. Look at what it says there in verse 4, children in whom was no blemish. That's a very good point, no blemish. And so he takes that idea and he says it's like the Levitical priesthood. They couldn't have a crooked toe. They couldn't have a broke tooth. There couldn't be anything wrong with the priesthood, or they could not serve in the priesthood. And so he's arguing from that. Again, it's not God's law. Okay? It's Babylonian law. I'll come back to the blemish in a minute. Everybody agrees. Would you pull up Isaiah 56:3 for me, please? Every theologian, conservative or liberal, agrees that when the word saros is used here in this verse, neither let the son of the stranger that had joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, the Lord hath utterly separated me from this people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. Every one of them says the word saros right there means castration. Oh yes, it would. Exactly. And but it's the word. Okay, it's the same word. Now, how do I want to proceed with this? Could you pull me up Isaiah 39:7? And that's going to be where we're going to come down to. And the sons that shall issue from thee, talking to the king, which thou shalt begot, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of where? All right. Now, Josephus and the Targum, which is one of the Jewish ancient writings, they say that they were eunuchs. Okay? Marty says it does not make any sense if they're not eunuchs to call them such. In the ancient world, that was part of what they'd done to people who were working in the court around the harems of the kings. Period. That's what they done. Marty, for the purpose of our study, is going to say they're eunuchs, not nobles. Okay? Now, you can disagree with me. You can have because there's people greater than me that disagree with me. Okay? And we'll be fine. But for this study, we're going to say they were made eunuchs by the king or the master of the eunuchs to serve in the court of the king, where they had no thing else to concentrate on except to be smart. And that's all they had to worry about, serving the king. Okay? They didn't have to worry about they was going to have a family or anything else. And again, I will say this, we're not talking about Potiphar. We're not talking about Egyptians. We're not talking about Israeli. We are talking about Babylon, kings of the east that were cruel beyond measure. Okay? So that's going to be my stand. You're going to see why as we go on, but that's always been my stand, but that's going to be my stand, okay? All right, so back to verse 2, let's see. No, let's... Okay, look with me in chapter 2, verse 2. I'm going to give you a word right here, and then we're going to move on with the names of these boys. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. You see the word Chaldeans there? That is the whole order of everybody that was there. That word is kashdim. It can be used to specify this group of advisors for the king, or it can be used for the whole of all of the kingdom. You've got to look at the context of how it's being used. Here, in that particular place, it's being used to talk about the advisors of the court. I just wanted to throw that out there. I know you was really interested in that word, and I can see it in all of your faces. So with that said, let's go and see what we can find about these Hebrew boys now. Let me get my notes up here. Okay, so let's start. Look at verse 3. And the king spake to Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel. Now, I'm going to say, a while ago, I said there's discussion about whether they brought them when they took over or what. I'm going to say this is the second deportation. Okay? I believe they go back and they take a second bunch of them. All right? That he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed. Why the king's seed? Anybody know? And of the princes. There's going to be a couple of different reasons. Not against nobody in this room, including myself, but people that come from blue blood, they know how to act around other blue bloods. That's just, I don't know how to act about it. I don't know which fork to use, what cup to drink out of. I'm making a mess. I'm knocking over half them glasses, okay? All right. He wanted people that was already trained. The hierarchy, the king's sons. Think about Proverbs. What was Proverbs for? Does anybody know? It was an instruction. Do you know who wrote it? Solomon. Do you know who he wrote it for? His son. But not only his son, but for anybody that might be in the court, and he was training them through Proverbs. Okay? And so that's the idea, that they already are getting educated. They wasn't getting educated in how to raise sheep. They were getting educated in higher things, higher thinking, and that's what he wanted. He wanted advisors. Huh? Yeah, he wanted advisors, exactly, how to rule. All right, so there's some other reasons, like later on as they got older, they would probably be able to help advise how to handle the Jewish people better than somebody that wasn't Jewish, okay? So, verse 4, children in whom's no blemish. Now, we can take this in a lot of ways, I think. As I was thinking about this and thinking about what people said about it, we could take this where we could say there's nothing, their hand ain't crumpled up. But we could also say where they're strong, well-rounded all the way around. They're healthy, whatever, intelligent, well-spoken, the whole 9 yards. I think it's more that realm instead of that there's nothing, they ain't got a crooked toe. Yeah. Yeah. Good height or whatever. I mean, I don't know. And skillful in wisdom, so they already have been given wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, so they could work through problems and understand science. Science as they knew in that day, and I'm going to tell you, they probably knew more science than we really realized. And such as he had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. So he wanted people that knew how to act, and whom they might teach the learning of the tongue of the Chaldeans. So again, he wanted them to be able to speak their language. All right? So we see that. Now, we got to hurry here. Verse 5, and the king appointed them daily provisions from the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank. So nourishing them 3 years. At the end of that, they might stand before him. So basically, they are getting an MDiv. They're getting a 3-year master's degree. And if you are not in the top of your class, you're going to go make bricks. Okay? I mean, that's basically. So they got 3 years to stand before the king. All right? Now, among these are the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, how many of y'all can remember those 4 names? No, we never remember those names. Yeah, I have too. My buddy David, he calls them by their Hebrew name every time he calls them. I know who he's talking about, but I never can. All right, so let's move on. Verse 7, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and of Hananiah, of Shadrach, and to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Now, before we get to what I want you to see, my application, I want to deal with these names. All right. So, Daniel. What does Daniel's name mean? God is my judge, or my judge, one or the other. His name is found in other places. Daniel is at least, there's at least 3 other people named Daniel. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 1 is David's son. One of his sons was named Daniel. Azariah, the son of Ithamar. Azariah chapter 8, verse 2, his name was Daniel. And in Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 6, there was a priest named Daniel. Now, I want you to help me out real quick. Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 14. While he does that, Hananiah. Hananiah means Jehovah is gracious, or Jehovah has been gracious. His name is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 25. Of other people are by that name. 1 Corinthians chapter 25, verse 23. 2 Corinthians chapter 26, verse 11. Jeremiah chapter 36, verse 12. You got that up there? 14:14. All right. Mishael. Who is that? Who is he that is God, or who is what God is? I like that. Who is what God is? I like that. 2 other people named the same thing. Exodus chapter 6, verse 22. Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 4. Azariah, the Lord helps, or the Lord has helped. Okay? A lot of people by that name. Do these 3 men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it? They should deliver, but their own souls by their righteousness, say the Lord God. All right? Verse 20, brother. 14:20. Though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, as I live, saith the Lord, they shall deliver neither son nor daughter. They shall but deliver their own souls by their righteousness. Chapter 28, verse 3, brother. Those verses is something to think on, but behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that thou can hide from me. What book does these come from? Okay. What is Ezekiel to Daniel? The contemporaries. The liberals say it's a different Daniel, because Daniel's written 3 or 4 centuries later. But we see right here that Ezekiel is giving credit to Daniel to being wise, okay, and righteous. Why would God record? Now think about it now. Daniel's over here in Shinar. He's in Babylon. Ezekiel's left in the land. Why would God allow Ezekiel in the land to talk about Daniel? He becomes a hero to those that are left in the land that's being oppressed in the land. Okay? Because he's made it in the king's court. But yet he's held his righteousness. Okay? Okay? Now, real quick, let me deal with these names because I know y'all ready to go home. New names. Daniel, Belshazzar. Baal protects his life. Remember, Baal is a Canaanite god. Okay? Hananiah, Shadrach. Command moon god. That's what that means. Shadrach means command moon god. All right? Probably refers to Marduk. The way Shadrach is spelled, it's like a hyphen, and the last three letters or characters are AKU, which is another spelling for Marduk. Okay? I know y'all, it is. Okay? All right. Meshach, Leopold says it's a contraction, and basically his name is his Hebrew name. Who is he that is God, or who is what God is? His new name, Meshach, it refers to Marduk. Okay, who is like Marduk? That is basically what it means. All right. So, Azariah, Abednego. It's actually a hyphenated servant of Nebo. Nebo is the son of Baal. All right. Now, one thing real quick before I tell you something about these names. Daniel always refers to himself by the Hebrew name, never his Babylonian name, but he always refers to his brethren by their Babylonian name. Does not mean that they fail. It just means that's the way that happens, okay? I could give you, like Joseph is referred to by his Egyptian name, Genesis chapter 41, verse 45. All right. Now, why all of the things? They took away the vessels. They put them in the house of their gods. They're giving you a portion of the king's meat. We'll come back and pick up on that next time. They're giving a portion of the king's meat. It's been sacrificed. It's his dainties. This is the best of the best in the land. Okay? They've changed your name. They are indoctrinating you. They're sending you to their school. They're indoctrinating you. They are trying their best to get you to see your God failed you, and your God has been defeated by our God, and therefore you need to step up and serve our God. We're trying to help you. Okay? Look at verse 8. This is the key to Daniel as integrity. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine that he drank. Therefore he requested. I want you to see the first little part of that. Daniel purposed in his heart. 14, 15-year-old boy in a strange land. Not mom and daddy to run home to. He's done purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself before his God. He lived to be at least 80 years past what we see here. So he's a 14 or 15-year-old boy at the most. Okay? So he comes in there, and you got to understand that they're men at that. I mean, they're just before getting married at 15. Okay? But here he is. He has been, in Marty's estimation, he's been made a eunuch. What was the major thing about Jews? Every Jewish boy that comes out of the matrix does what? You have circumcision. Now we are taking your sign away from you. Okay? But he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. And that there carries Daniel throughout the whole thing. This is where the ethics is going to come from with Daniel, right there. We have got, you keep hearing me say this, and I wish I had all the answers to this. We have got to make disciples. My son and I, we've had a lot of conversations. We got all these cults out here, the Mormons, the JWs, the Muslims, yeah, whoever you want to talk about. We got all these cults out here, and they indoctrinate their children, and they're not ashamed to indoctrinate their children. And they're not ashamed to stand up for what they believe in, period. Whether it cost them their job, whether it cost them whatever it is, they're not ashamed. And yet, we are teaching our children that we will compromise our convictions so we can be accepted by our friends in the world, and we can we wonder why our children are walking away from the church. Okay? They're walking away from the church because we're afraid to indoctrinate them. If we don't indoctrinate them, this world will. Daniel had been indoctrinated in Jerusalem. There was others that could not take the pressure. Why are they just four mentioned? Yeah, there was four that God knew he could trust in that position. Yeah, yep, exactly. And that's where we're going to go. How do we live in Babylon and still be Christians? That's going to be our underlying theme as we deal with Daniel and what he does. We're going to talk about the prophet part of it, the prophetic part of it. We're going to talk about the ins and outs of all the different things going on and their faith and all that. But the underlying current, what we're going to make application to, is ethically, how did Daniel make his decisions? And how can we live in Babylon in a culture that is, for the first time ever, with a minority? All right, so that's where we're going with this thing. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord God, we want to thank you for this day.